Today we're going to be talking about how to preach a specific kind of prophetic literature called apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic literature is found in books such as Daniel and Ezekiel, in the book of Zechariah, but especially it's found in the book of the Revelation in the New Testament. Apocalyptic literature is popular among lay people. They like to hear about it, and ministers, they like to preach on it because it's a challenge. It's almost like a logic puzzle to try to put it together. But it's also dangerous to interpret because the symbolic nature of apocalyptic literature can tempt us into preaching things that are our own interpretation rather than the Word of God. This we must not do. Apocalyptic literature has brought us some of the greatest expression of faith over the years that we have. But we must be faithful to the text and say what the authors actually meant, not what we interpret them to mean today.
Today we're going to be looking at preaching from the apocalyptic literature. The main characteristics of apocalyptic literature are that it was written generally during a time of persecution, when people could not say directly what was on their mind. It was written in symbolic form, using symbols rather than saying things directly. It was usually stated in a form of a dream or a vision. It was written to convey hidden meanings to people who read it, who were in the know. It was written with a numerological structure. That means it uses names, dates, places, and numbers in a symbolic fashion. Now, there are certain rules that we should follow when we're preaching or teaching apocalyptic writing that is different from the rest of the scriptures. First of all, we need to take things symbolically, unless there is a good reason to take them literally. This symbolism includes names, dates, numbers, places, characters.
Think about the story of Moses crossing the Red Sea. Now that is a literal story. The Bible intends it to be taken literally, which means that when they set foot on the floor of the Red Sea, they were setting foot on dry sand. That the sides of the waters really did mount up on either side. That happened in history. On the other hand, think about the story of the four horsemen of the apocalypse in the Revelation. The four horsemen that are released upon the world stand for famine, war, disease, and death. These we do not expect to see literally galloping through the skies, but these are symbols that we learn to take. Now, that's what I mean when we say that we take apocalyptic literature symbolically first. Unless there's some powerful reason for believing that there are going to be literally four horses galloping through the air, we take it as a symbol of what they bring.
So how do we decode these symbols? Where do the symbols come from? First of all, they come from the text itself. Very frequently, it will be explained in some other part of the book what those symbols mean. So we need to read the whole book in its context and understand where that comes from. Second, they come from the rest of the Bible. Much of what is written in Revelation and Daniel are actually references to what happens in the rest of the Bible. So we go back to the Bible and we look there. Third, they come from the culture of their time. If we begin to examine the culture that produces the apocalyptic literature, very frequently we will understand more about what those symbols mean. For example, the number 666 in Revelation is also the numerological equivalent of the name Nero Caesar, who was Caesar at the time. These things help us to understand apocalyptic literature. Fourth, many of them are simply unknown. They'll be revealed to us in the end. That does not mean, however, that they're not meaningless to us. We just don't know their precise meaning and will not until the end of time.
All right, let's take Revelation, for example. It refers to Babylon, and when it says Babylon, it means Rome. 666 is the numerical value of Nero Caesar's name, who was the first Caesar to persecute the Christians. Rome is a city set on 7 hills. When it refers to the 7-headed beast, it says it refers to the 7 hills. These are symbols that are drawn from the times, and we need to know the times before we can understand how to interpret those symbols.
Second, look to the past and present to interpret as well as to the future. One of the big mistakes made in apocalyptic literature is assuming that everything is always about the future tense, when in reality they're writing to encourage and to help a group of people who are currently under persecution. If you begin to look at the times in which they were written, many times you will be able to understand much more about what is being said. The prophets who wrote apocalyptic literature did not always write about the future. Look at the past and present as well. Third, keep grace in mind. Remember, God is giving us this information so that it will point us to His grace and His love and mercy. I can summarize the entire book of Revelation in 2 words: we win. Keep that victory in mind when you preach apocalyptic literature. Fourth, look at the big picture and not so much at the details. Details are important in apocalyptic literature, there's no doubt about that. But one of the mistakes that people make is trying to give a futurist interpretation on every word or phrase that is given in the book of Revelation or the book of Daniel. Instead, look at the broad sweeps, the big picture, the victory over Satan, the victory over the Antichrist, the victory over the beast. These are the important things. When we get into too many details, we become simply chroniclers of our day. And the more detail we look at in the book of Revelation, and the more we try to explain it, the more likely it is that we're going to be wrong in our interpretation. If we keep the picture on the big picture, we'll stay closer to what God really wants us to hear right now. Fifth, know the time and the context. Make sure that you take into consideration the time and place that it was written and the people to whom it was originally written. That goes with all the scriptures, but it's particularly important in apocalyptic literature. Finally, blessed is he who hears the word. The book of Revelation and Daniel are particularly beautiful when they are read aloud. The hearing of the Word of God in all of its scope and beauty is the most important and beautiful part. Revelation is frequently used at funerals, and for good reason, because the sound of the words brings such comfort. Do not neglect to listen to the text and the beauty of the text and bring it out as you preach apocalyptic literature. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now is the dwelling of God with men, and he will live with them. And they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things are passed away.
As I said, preaching the epistles is an easy exercise compared to the preaching of some other passages. Nevertheless, we must always preach them within the context of the times they were written and with God's grace in mind.